Hey everybody, welcome to Children's Chapel. Today your lesson is from Exodus, and the lesson is Manna from Heaven. Here's Jackie Bodecker reading the lesson.
A reading from the book of Exodus. Everyone was whining to Moses and Aaron. If only we'd stayed in Egypt. Even if we died there, at least we had food to eat. You brought us into the wilderness to starve us all. Then God said to Moses, I'm going to rain bread from heaven for you, and each day the people will gather enough for that day. We'll see if they can follow this set of instructions. Every sixth day, they can bring in enough for 2 days, so they can take a day off. So Moses and Aaron said to everyone, God heard your complaint. In the morning, you will see bread that God will provide in the wilderness. There's no point in complaining or thanking us. It's all God's doing. In the evening, God provided quail so that the people could eat meat. And in the morning, they saw bread called manna for them to gather. They weren't sure what it was. Moses told them, that's the bread God said he would send you. And God said, now you'll know that I am God. The word of the Lord.
Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Kintz. I'm part of the kindergarten team here at Redeemer Sunday School, and I am so happy to welcome you to our virtual Sunday school year. And we're going to start off by taking a virtual road trip. Think about if you've ever been on a road trip with your family or friends, and think about some of the things you take along with you. I know when I used to go on a road trip with my family, when I was little, we would always take extra clothing for if we stopped, and take things to do in the car to keep us occupied, like games or a book or music. But the most important thing we would take would be the food. And usually that food would last us for the whole road trip, but sometimes we'd get off on a different route, or we would just travel longer than we thought, and we would run out of food. Well, what do you think you do if you run out of food when you're on your road trip? Well, what we would do, we would find a favorite restaurant that we could go to, or maybe stop at like Publix or a Wawa and pick up some food that we could eat in the car. But what do you think would happen if you were driving along and there were no restaurants and you couldn't find a grocery store? What would you do? Well, this is a problem that Moses had a long, long time ago when he took the Israelites out of Egypt. They went on what you could call a road trip, and it was for a very, very, very long time, and they had no food. And we are going to find out in this week's lesson how God helped them and how they managed to get by without food.
The desert is a very, very wild place. So hot during the day, and there's no water. Nothing grows in it. And during the night, it's so cold, and the winds cause it to change every single day. It's always different. Our story today takes us back to a time in the desert when Moses had been successful in getting God's people out of bondage in Egypt, and they had passed over into the wilderness. And God had led them by a cloud during the day and a pillar of fire at night. And they had been traveling for a long time. And they started to get hungry because the food they had carried with them had run out. They began to complain. They began to grumble. And they began to whine. And that is where our story begins. The whining of God's people out in the wilderness because they were so hungry. In our kindergarten class, we know it's time for story time when the candles are lit. And so, since we're sharing this story with everybody, we'd like you to see the way we do it in kindergarten. Back to our story. God's people didn't have enough food to eat. And as I said, they were complaining, and so God sent food to them. At evening that night, God sent small birds called quail for them to catch and eat. And the next morning when they woke up and came out of their tents, the ground was covered with heavy dew that looked like frost. And after the dew had lifted, the children of Israel, God's people, saw small white things on the ground. When they came out of their tents, they looked at it. Manna, they asked, which means, what is it? Since no one knew, that became its name, manna. And they turned to Moses, their leader, and said, what is it? And Moses said, this is the bread that God promised to send you. Gather it up, as much as you need for today. You don't need to keep any of it for tomorrow, for it will come every day. And every day at breakfast time, it was just like this. They found sweet wafers of bread on the ground, and this wonderful heavenly bread tasted like honey cookies. And then, as the sun became hot, it melted away. Every single day, it melted away. And every single night, they would go to bed, and the next morning, they would wake up, and it was all over the ground again, enough to fill their bellies. The sixth day, Moses said to the people, gather twice as much as you need today. Prepare what you need to eat today and lay up the rest for tomorrow, because tomorrow is the Sabbath, and manna will not come on the Sabbath day. And God continued to provide manna for his people every day for 40 years while they traveled in the wilderness, until his people reached the promised land. And he continues to provide the living bread for us every day now. I wonder what it felt like to be hungry in the desert. I wonder how it felt to find bread on the ground every single morning. I wonder how God provides living bread for us every single day today.